In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew our puff and pencil ruffle dress. If you don't have the sewing pattern yet, then head over to our website to get it. I'll show you how to sew the dress without sleeves and collar in this video, but if you're adding sleeves or collar, I'll mention when you need to switch to the sleeve or collar video tutorial. When you cut the back piece, remember to cut down the line for the keyhole opening in the back. It's indicated on the pattern piece where to cut. As you can see, I've already done it here. Cut the same length on the back facing. Iron interfacing onto the back of all the facing pieces. There's several ways to do that, but this is the way I usually do it. Make sure you don't iron it onto the ironing board if you do it this way, but you can also pre-cut the interfacing and combine it afterwards. Then it's time to overlock or zigzag the edges of all the pieces. You don't have to overlock the neckline of the facing pieces and the neckline on the front and back pieces, as well as along the armholes and the armhole side of the armhole facing. Now it's time to make the ties for the keyhole opening. You can use pre-made ties if you prefer, but here I'll show you how to make them from the same fabric as the dress. You'll need to make two ties, so cut two pieces measuring 4 times 35 centimeters or 1.5 inch by 13 3/4 of an inch. Fold each tie lengthwise down the middle, wrong sides facing each other, and press flat with an iron. Then fold the tie open again so there's now a center fold, and then fold the long sides toward the center fold, wrong sides facing each other, and then fold the tie once more along the center fold. Press the tie flat with an iron and then sew a top stitch along the open edge. Before you sew, also fold one end of the tie 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch inward. It's not necessary to finish the other end as it will be hidden under the facing. Now sew the shoulder seams of the dress. Place the back piece with the right side facing up and the front piece on top of it with the right side facing down. Align the shoulder edges on each side of the top and sew along the edges with 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch of seam allowance. And then remember to press the seam open and flat with an iron afterwards. If you're adding a color to the ruffle dress, then now is the time to head over to the video tutorial for the color and then come back here afterwards. Now we're adding the neckline facing. So place the back facing with the right side facing up and position the front facing piece on top with the right side facing down. And then align the shoulder edges on each side of the facing and sew along the edge with 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch of seam allowance. Turn the dress right side out. Place the facing on the dress's neckline with the right side facing the right side of the dress. Make sure the shoulder seams match, and as you can see here, I've pressed the seam allowances open and flat with an iron. Pin the two ties to the back in a sandwich between the layers so that they lie parallel to the neckline and the ends stick out. Sew all the way around the neckline and the keyhole opening with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance by cutting small notches all the way around and cut the corners without cutting through the stitching. Then turn the facing to the inside of the dress and press the edge flat with an iron. Then sew the facing in the shoulder seam to keep it in place. Now we're going to sew gathering stitches on the ruffle piece, which is the lower part of the dress. Start by increasing the stitch length on your sewing machine to the highest setting. If you have divided the piece in separate pieces, then sew the pieces together first. Then sew 2 rows of stitching along the long top side of the panel. It's important not to secure the threads at the beginning or at the end. Also make sure to leave a long thread tail at the start and at the end of the stitching so you have a thread to pull on. Sew the first row 1/2 centimeter or 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and the second row 1.5 centimeter or 1/2 an inch from the edge. Pull the long thread tails at each end to gather the fabric. Then distribute the gathers evenly across the entire panel until it matches the width of the lower edges of the front and back pieces. Place the front piece of the dress with the right side facing up and the gathered ruffle piece with the right side facing down on top of the front piece, so that the gathering stitches align with the edge of the lower part of the front piece. Then pin the gathered panel in place. Sew the gathered panel and front piece together 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch from the edge, sewing right between your two gathering stitches. If your dress is going to have sleeves, then now it's time to head over to the sleeves video tutorial and then come back here. Now we're going to sew the side seams. Place the front piece of the dress with the right side facing up. Place the back piece on top of the front piece with the right side facing down. Pin them together and make sure to align the seams at the gathered section first. If the dress is going to be sleeveless, then sew from the armhole down to the hem. If the dress has sleeves, then sew all the way from the outer edge of the sleeve into the armhole where the sleeve meets the dress, and continue down along the side of the dress to the bottom edge. Make sure to match the seam under the sleeve as well. Press the seam allowance open and flat with an iron. Now it's time to hem the dress. Fold the bottom edge of the dress up by 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch all the way around from the right side towards the wrong side of the fabric. Press the edge sharp and flat with an iron. Now sew a seam from the right side 1.5 centimeters or half an inch from the edge all the way around. If your dress is not going to have sleeves, you will now need to sew a facing onto the armhole to finish the edge. Sew both ends of a front facing piece to a back facing piece, right sides together. The back and front pieces are not entirely identical, even though it looks like that, so it's a good idea to mark the back of the front piece so you know which side of the dress to attach it to afterwards. Turn the dress right side out. Place the facing on the outside of the dress's armhole with the right side of the facing against the right side of the dress. As you can see here, I've pressed the seam allowance open and flat with an iron. Ensure that the shoulder seams on both pieces match. Sew all the way around the armhole with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance by cutting small notches in all areas where the seam curves. Turn the facing to the inside of the dress. Press the edge flat. You can also sew an understitch to keep the facing secured inside, but that's optional. We also recommend tacking the facing to the dress at the shoulder seam from the right side of the dress to keep the facing in place. Lastly, remove the 2 gathering stitches with a seam ripper or carefully pull them out. We hope you like your finished ruffle dress. We would love to see the results, so tag us or share it with the hashtag #PPRuffle if you like.